Hey, my name is Godswill. This is That's Dope. We got Josh, and we have a very, very special guest with us. We have Steve Maeda, one of the executive producers of the live action One Piece show. Big hit. I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy I get to talk to you. The crazy thing, before we get into it, is like we met like at a party long before, like right before pandemic happened, and
Yep.
we bonded over Pokemon Go. And that's how we stay tight, and like we would shoot the shit with like, oh yeah, I'm hoping this goes well, or I'll see gifts from South Africa.
Yep.
And now that it happened, I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy that this live action has happened and it worked out super well, and the world is celebrating it. So congratulations to you. How do you feel about that?
Oh, fantastic! It was so nice to have the reception and response that we had to the show, and there was no guarantee that it was going to be any good at all, other than what we thought. And so, it was very much a labor of love. Yeah, 4 years of my life, not intending it to be that long, but that's how long it took to kind of go from manga to live action on screen. And I certainly went through every step of the process, and it was a lot of fun. It's such a great world to play in, um, and at the same time, really long and involved, and full of a lot of compromises and a lot of very passionate debates about how things should be. So it was definitely an educational experience.
I definitely want to get into all of that because One Piece is my favorite for sure. And I've been saying throughout the whole time, talking to you gave me a lot of hope. And I'm glad that it paid off, honestly. It's like when I first met you, you told me that you read the manga. And I was honestly stunned. I was like, whoa, you guys actually like read the source material. Like it feels like that's sort of rare. Like, is that rare? Like that people like actually get into the source material, or like are you guys like special for actually reading?
No, I don't
Also,
think
you
it's.
guys are pretty special for reading One Piece, I think.
Yeah, I don't think it's special to read the source material, but a lot of times you deviate more from the source material than what I think the audience would like. And so it's always that balance of how far do you stick with, the tried and true that worked for the manga, and how much are you allowed to adapt, or how much is the right amount to adapt to make changes that are going to help you with a season of television. So, when Oda-san wrote the manga, he certainly didn't anticipate, yeah, I have to encapsulate this into 8 episodes. So for us, it was taking, the 1,000+ chapters of the manga and saying, okay, where do we break this up? And for first season, it just made sense to do um, the roughly the first 100, the first 85, 90 episodes of the East Blue arc. And it felt like the right kind of amount of journey for them to have, the right amount of travel. And then also there was a really nice bookend in kind of Luffy's story, but really Nami's arc was the thing that gave us bookends on both sides. And seeing where she starts from and where she ends up felt like a nice place to end the season, right around there.
I like that. Like I thought it was like just enough for people to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like where I usually tell people like if you watch the anime, maybe this is like the amount you watch, and you can give up if you don't like it. So after that, right?
Yeah, a lot of people are
I,
daunted by the length, which I totally get.
yeah,
Um,
I get that too.
and
Unfortunately,
I'm still daunted by the length. I have caught up at least through Wano, but I'm a little behind. I got some more chapters to go.
I mean, there's a lot been going on for sure. So I'm excited for you to catch up, but also I'm excited. I'm excited for more people. Like, a lot of people have gotten into the franchise because of this live action, and like, was that the intention, or how do you feel about that?
Oh, I love it. I remember when I first watched Game of Thrones. I had no idea what it was. I'd never read the novels, and I watched the first, I think, episode or two, and went, "Oh my god, I love this! This is so cool!" And it was based on a novel. I got to read that, and so it drove me to the novel, which I then read while I was watching first season, which was fantastic because you get to see what choices were made and how it's different. And that was certainly the case. I hope was the case with One Piece, that if you like the live action, it'll drive you to the manga, it'll drive you to the anime, and you can see the different interpretations and how they work. I just think the whole thing is fun.
Yeah, no, I love it. Like you guys, I think I honestly have done like a great service for like the franchise. You know, like this is a scary franchise for people to start, and you guys made it like a lot more palatable.
Hmm.
And you know, honestly, like even things like the snail phones, I thought that would be like off-putting to people, but you guys made it in a way that people like actually love it. Like a lot of people, I thought people would be like freaked out by or like would think this world was really strange. And I love like how you guys made it like really relatable, sort of like it felt like Pirates of the Caribbean, but like um, it felt like One Piece for sure. And I think that was
Yeah,
like a
but
really cool touch. Yeah,
yeah,
I
that was the
really
intent.
appreciate that.
The intent was to take what was wonderful about the manga and try to translate it into live action, because that's the only reason to do live action is, what kind of different emotional experience can we have, still playing all the wonderful moments that we can from the source material, but then also add to the story and the characters in ways that feel really organic. Like, okay, that wasn't in the manga, or wasn't in the manga till a couple hundred chapters later, but that felt good. That felt like the
Yeah.
right place to have that storyline come in, or feels like an addition that could have been in the manga. And so the goal is always to try and stick close enough, but also um, to have the opportunity to make changes that and modifications that will help get you through that first season, because seasons have a different flow.
All right, fantastic. I wanted to ask you, what is an executive producer and how'd you get started into that?
Sure. Executive producer is a title that can mean a lot of different things on a show. There are non-writing executive producers who are responsible for all sorts of different things. Some of them may broker the original deal for the rights to the underlying property. Some of them may be a producing entity or a small studio where they are giving notes and kind of shepherding the process along the way, and kind of enabling the writers and the writing executive producers to do their jobs better and easier. Then there are writing executive producers who can be either very senior people or the showrunners of the show, and those that's the kind of that's me basically. So I was on the ground, from the beginning of writing a pilot script to breaking out the season three different times, and then going through, once we got the green light to go, getting that green light to go from Netflix, which was a big deal. Getting it sold, getting it greenlit, getting the scripts for the first season all in shape creatively, and then executing those in production and in post production. So it's normally about, it should have been a 2-year process. It ended up being a 4-year process because we had a lot of stops and starts with
Wow.
COVID, and
Yeah,
also with
about to ask, like,
trying
was
to
it also
determine which
COVID that
version of
like,
One Piece to make. Yeah, but there were 3 different versions of the show, and the first one was a 10-episode season that incorporated a lot more, including Logtown at the end, which I loved, but was pretty different from the manga. We were taking a lot more liberties with it, and it was very, very expensive. And Netflix at that point said, no, 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 we want to cut the order to 8, and to save a little bit of money, and then also we want the budget to come way down. And so that was a version that we then broke, that we didn't love, because One Piece needs a budget to be able to be good and be attractive to the fan base. And so we did it, but at the same time, it felt like this really is not the best way to go. And then Oda-san uh, saw those outlines and was not happy. And I think that prompted Netflix to then reconsider and say, okay, we'll do 8 episodes, but we're going to do a version that's much more faithful to the manga. We want to keep Oda-san happy, and so we're all in on this. We're going to really spend a healthy budget and do this, and not cut any corners on visual effects or um, flashback stories or any of that, because the one of the things about One Piece that makes it, I think this is one of the reasons it hasn't been done up to this point, is the expense. It's a very intensive travel show. And what that means, it kind of breaks the rules of TV in a way, because in a travel show, you're going from place to place every episode, or every 2 episodes in our case. And it's very expensive because you build a set, like Bratier built it for 2 episodes, shot a couple more scenes in there, for a couple of later pieces, and tore it down. And it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, you could build a set that large and spend not just an entire season there, you could spend a series at Baratier. You could run an entire show about the kitchen and the ins and outs of Baratier. So it was a very unusual show in that there was so much construction and so much travel built into it. And you kind of have to, if you're going to do One Piece, that's what you have to do.
That's a great point. Like I remember seeing like the behind the scenes where you guys showed like building the sets. Low
Mhm.
key, I was hoping that those sets were still up.
A couple of them are,
But
but not very many. They had to come down because they were shooting other stuff there, and it was taking up
ah,
space in their tanks. They have three
that
big
makes
water tanks
sense.
up there that we built inside
Wow.
of and around. And the Going Merry is still exists, of course, and a couple of the interior cabins and things. But for the most part, all those sets have come down, unfortunately.
Oh wow, dang, that's that's tough. I did want to ask also, how come South Africa? Like, I was really impressed. Like, I never actually, I don't even know other projects that did that. I can only think like District 9, but I'm not really knowledgeable like that.
Yeah, I think District 9 shot in Johannesburg. We shot in Cape Town, which is a couple hour plane flight away. But the reason for shooting there was there were a couple of good points. And one was that the production costs there are relatively low. So we could afford to build all the sets that we built. The craftsmanship is so excellent, and there's so many skilled workers out there who are so good at this. And at the same time, the costs were not exorbitant. We could build everything we wanted to build, and we wanted to build as opposed to using the volume like the Mandalorian does, with the big kind of VFX LED screens around us. We didn't want to do that. We couldn't because they didn't have one in South Africa, and then we also didn't want to do a ton of blue screen shooting where the actors are in, on a stage with a bunch of blue boxes to look at and pretend. So we were able to actually build things that they could be inside a village, inside of Syrup or Marlow Park, or we chose to build all that so that the actors could be inside of them and we could stage sequences there and get real reactions to being on ships, to being in these villages, and so that was a part of it. And then the other part of South Africa was the show Black Sails had shot there on Stars, and as a result, they had a couple of those really big ships already built, and they were pretty run down by the time we got to them because Black Sails had been over for a couple of years. But we refurbished all those ships, and that was the basis of the Love Duck, and Garp's warship, which were the same ship, by the way, that we repurposed. The Going Merry, Shanks' ship, and then a couple of other of the large ships. They had them there, and so we not only had the crew that had worked on Black Sails and knew how to rig those ships correctly, because it's a big ordeal to do it right, and also very dangerous because the wind kicks up and you have to stop shooting because the sails are up and they're going to potentially cause a problem. And then we also had a great line producer named Chris Symes, who had worked for 4 years on Black Sails and knew the ins and outs of how to make those ships look good.
That's so dope. I really wanted to say I really appreciated like actual built sets and practical effects.
Yeah,
I think that was the thing that a lot of people were really worried about. Like, how are the effects going to be?
yeah.
Is it all just going to be CGI? And I think it was so dope. Like making the fishmen look how they made, or they looked, or making Buggy look how he looked. Like the internet is thirsting so much over them. Like when do you guys think of or like decide like to do like the practical effects or like instead of CGI?
It was a cost thing primarily because CGI is very expensive. But we knew we were going to be doing a lot of CGI. We just said let's build as much as we can, do as much as we can in camera, shoot the scenes, use prosthetics, and embellish it with CG if we need that. Perfect example is the snail phones you brought up. The snail phones were made by our prosthetics team in kind of consort with our props people and our production designer. And so they designed those snail phones to be puppeted. So there's a puppeteer underneath the table who's moving the mouth and the eye stalks. And then you remove that person digitally from under the table so that it looks like the phone is up there doing its own thing. So the mouth could move on the snail phone and the eye stalks could move. But the eye stalks, there were two problems with the eye stalks. And one was that they bounced and they would jiggle. And then the second thing was they couldn't blink. You could move them kind of independently or together, and they didn't blink. And so then we went in with VFX, with our VFX supervisors who were wonderful, and said, hey, can you guys stabilize the eye stalks so that they're not bouncing and they're just still? And then every once in a while, add a blink in there. and it's very subtle. I don't know that anyone ever really noticed the snail phone blinking, but it just makes it look alive. And so that was an
Oh, I
example
gotta
of
look at
not doing
that.
a snail phone like a complete CG effect, but doing the stuff you need to do to make it come to life.
That's so dope. The
Yeah,
little
they were
effects
cool. I love
were
those snail phones.
appreciated.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love
like
those snail phones so much. I wanted to
you
steal
know,
one and take it home with me.
even the portable one, I thought that was really cool. Like it felt like a really like a whole species that was used, and it didn't feel weird. Like I thought people might be weirded out by them. Like who
Yeah,
likes
no,
giant snails?
yeah, and I love Nami's little snail phone that she put in her ear, and it's got
I
like
thought that was
coughing when
so.
it gets water. That was
Yeah,
definitely an invention of. I mean, there are Bluetooth style snail phones in the manga, but we took it and kind of really ran with it and made it animated it. And that was another example of CG on top of an actual prop that our prop department built. And then we took it a step further with Garp's megaphone because we're like, well, he's going to be shouting across the water at the Going Merry, telling them to lower their sails and submit. And we thought, what would be great is if we had it be a snail megaphone because it's about voice transfer. And so we thought that'd be really fun. And so that was a invention of the live action that felt like I thought anyway, it felt like it could have been something from the manga.
that's awesome. Like I think I did want to talk about like sort of like the additions that you had and like the sort of
Yeah, sure.
mindset for that. Like I think like it helped the flow of this, but I guess like one, how did Oda feel about that? Two, like where did the decision to make these changes instead, I guess, going verbatim like that? Um, like I think it was a great decision because like it made things flow, especially for 8 episodes. But where did that decision come from, and also how did Oda feel?
It was a combination of things. I mean, the decisions were, you know, my decisions in concert with the other executive producers and the studio and the network. So a lot of debate, a lot of discussion. When we wanted to do things like move up Garp and Kobe and Helmeppo and tell those stories because those are not in the first 100 chapters.
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
come in around chapter 300 something, and you learn that Kobe and Helmeppo have become friends and that they're under Garp's tutelage and all that. And I really felt strongly that we needed a marine threat behind them, kind of pursuing and chasing, so that you'd have the stakes would be higher, as opposed to Luffy saying, "Hey, I want to find the One Piece and let's sail to this." It was always about why are they going to this next location. And sometimes that's in the manga and sometimes it's not. And so it was like, oh, we need a new boat. Oh, we need to go rescue Nami. And it was about coming up with ways to motivate them other than Luffy saying, I want to find the One Piece, which of course is the most important thing. But um,
It's
we needed
nebulous,
to
I
give
guess,
them,
right?
yeah, to give them motivations to go do that. And then also we made a decision to bring Arlong up, and we were really nervous about this one, but I absolutely felt it was the right thing to do, which is to not have Krieg come to Baratier, but have Arlong come instead, because it sets him up
That
for the
was
next.
crazy.
It sets him up for the Arlong Park episodes, and
Yeah, that was so dope to see
Krieg's battle and
Mihawk
his
do his thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it was really fun, and that was an example where Oda really kind of stepped up into it because we initially were going to do that Mihawk scene where Garp calls him and he's slaughtering those pirates on the beach. And we didn't have any money to do it. It was an addition very late in the show. And we're like, okay, we're going to put Mihawk in, but there's going to be a bunch of dead pirates and he will have just finished up with them. And then Oda got a hold of it. And he was like, no, Mihawk needs to be much more ferocious. He needs to be formidable. We need to do more. And it went from Mihawk and a bunch of dead pirates on the beach to Mihawk fighting the pirates, like having an actual, stunt sequence with actors and stunt people being cabled and jerked, kind of out of frame when they're hit with Mihawk's sword, to then adding Krieg's ship offshore, and then having and then an additional step, which was having Mihawk split the ship in two, which is something that we see at Baratier with Krieg's ship, but we did it on the beach instead, and it was something that was very dear to Oda-san, and so we ended up doing it, and I loved it. It was great. We just didn't have the money initially to do it.
Okay, cool. No, I was gonna say, it sounds like you guys were able to be as manga faithful as you wanted to be, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
Just because you never know how the pushback's gonna be creatively.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
Yeah, and I was wondering when it came to like things like dialogue, because I'm sure you're aware of the other live actions that have come out between Cowboy Bebop and Death Note and
Of
everything
course,
else.
yeah,
Yeah, they a lot of the fan base is always torn on how they want it to be represented, right?
yeah.
Everyone's always complaining about something, and I was really wondering. It was like for you guys when you're making this happen, did you guys look at like lines in the manga and be like, hey, we got to get this line in here particularly. This is an important line. Or was it more just like taking your own, I guess, courtesies and just kind of being like, hey, this makes more sense for a human to speak this way since it's live action? Because, like things translated
For sure,
directly from
yeah,
anime or manga. If they made a Naruto live action, we heard some kids say believe it 1,000 times. Like, this is taking me out. You know what I mean? This isn't working for me. So I'm sure you guys had to just be like, hey, this works more as a real person. Because Nami seemed very realistic.
yeah,
And even Zoro for a situation, he was still serious, very stoic, but he seemed a little bit more realistically
yeah.
serious, right?
For sure.
So,
And yes, that's always a battle because obviously when you do an adaptation, you're not doing one to one. There's no point in doing a shot for shot or one to one and just
right,
using the dialogue. You have to add dialogue to live action. And in doing so, you're writing lines that were not in the original manga or in the original anime. And so that's always a risk. And the trick is to try and capture the spirit of what those characters would say and write dialogue that feels like it came from them, even though it's not something that was in the original source material. And that's always difficult. It's hard to get the tone of One Piece down, and it's hard to get those characters to sound like they need to sound while adding dialogue that they never spoke in the manga or the anime. And so that's a challenge, and that's part of what we do as writers is put ourselves in the position of, okay, this is based on a beloved property that people are really going to be critical about. So how do we have those characters talk? What situations do we put them in? How do they act in a way that's going to feel like the manga or the anime? And it was hard. There were lots of agreements on coming up with new stuff, and there were some disagreements as well. With a big bone of contention between us and the manga was Luffy doesn't have a lot of doubt as a character in the manga or in the anime. And I thought it was important that in order to show character growth from him, that he have a little bit of doubt, a little bit of at least self-reflection after Zoro gets hurt and nearly killed by Mihawk. And that he's kind of like questioning himself a little bit, but then comes out of it and he's Luffy. That was a gigantic battle because it's very different than how he is in the manga. And I think we made the right decision. People could argue.
I
Uh,
agree. Like I feel like this Luffy felt a lot more human versus like an anime character,
yeah,
which I think was also a huge fear. Like I like that Luffy was questioning what does it mean to be a captain early
yeah,
on.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. There's a
yeah. I
lot
like
of
that as well, and
yeah.
I like that Sanji was able to bring in the Zeph story as part of the flashback um, to kind of illustrate that for Luffy. Excuse me, I'm gonna move a little bit. Sun is coming. Um, it was nice to have Sanji be able to be a part of that story, and that Luffy to learn a little something from learning that Zeph was a pirate. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. I also want to say, like, I think it was really cool, like, that the characters felt faithful, but they also had differences from anime manga. Um, I mean, for example, Usopp, right? Usopp being more of a cool guy versus like the sort of cowardly guy that a lot of people might not like originally, but like I think this Usopp was very likable and it was really cool.
Yeah, thanks. I
And
thought so too. I thought that
yeah,
Jacob did a wonderful job with him, and
yeah, killed
similarly
it.
with Sanji, it's like Sanji's womanizing, can be a
Yeah, a
little,
little much
over the
for
top, and so
yes.
it's like, okay, let's have him flirt, let's have him, be an incorrigible flirt, but we're not going to do the hard eyes, or anything like that with
I'm
Sanji, and
glad.
and
Yeah,
keep
no,
it more
definitely.
realistic.
You guys bystep a lot of the fears that, like, at least I was worried about. Like, how can this translate for regular people who have no clue, like, what this series is about, and things that, like, even long term fans might have an issue with. But I really thought this adaptation was just hit the that balance really well.
Yeah, thanks.
I did, yeah, cool. I did want to ask, like, what was like one of the biggest struggles that you had, I guess, like in making this outside of outside of COVID and actually I
Yeah.
guess COVID is a big part of it. Yeah, I guess what was
COVID
your biggest
was
struggle, honestly?
COVID was huge because in order to shoot the show, We had to wear masks the entire time on set. Of course, the actors took theirs, had face shields and then took them off for when they were shooting a scene. But we were tested 3 times a week. I've had more, cotton swab shoved up my nose than I ever care to have again. But we had to. And if someone did go down, and we had a lot of people get sick, then all of a sudden you're, isolating people into certain pods or saying, hey, this department can't come to set for a couple of days. When an actor went down, that was really problematic, obviously, because you had to shuffle the schedule to make sure that we could shoot something. Because once the production starts, you don't want to have a day off because you're paying everybody at that point. Mm-hmm. So that was a big deal. And at one point, one of our directors got sick and went down. And it was funny now. It wasn't funny at the time. He was directing. We put him on an iPad and had him direct via the iPad for one day.
Like a robot kid, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was like we were taking him around on the iPad, and it was a disaster because no one could hear him, and he couldn't really see, he was piped in to the cameras on set, but we just said, we got to wait till he gets better.
Dang. At least AI can't take over yet, right?
Not yet. Can't do that.
I was going to ask about the tone. I remember we were talking about it just a second ago. The tone for the characters. And Godzilla brought up Usopp, who I thought was a completely more enjoyable character. A likable character. I'm not going to say enjoyable. People enjoy things for different reasons, but likable character in my eyes. Because, he was still like, he lied and whatever.
Yeah.
You had a reason for why he was doing it. It was like he was just really it seemed like he was really trying to do it just so he could feel important to this, other character that he appreciated and everything else. It was cool. It felt like a real motivation. When it came to the direction, though, like I was wondering because the direction of the characters, if I showed, I was watching with a friend who had never seen One Piece at all. She had never seen it. I was like, I wanted to see someone's opinion on this without anything going in. I really was curious. And she seemed to enjoy it. And I remember one of the things was like, she noticed as much as I think I did, where it was like, it felt like Zoro and Nami for sure. And like a lot of the other characters, they seemed very much like, if you don't watch anime, you understand these characters and they seem like people.
Yeah.
I felt like Luffy's direction seemed like he was really acting out the anime more. Was that like a thing more on him, the actor? Like he was choosing to portray it that way? Or was that more of like this is the only way Luffy acts, we kind of have to go in this direction? Because he's kind of an out of a norm character.
The tough thing about Luffy is that he's really unique as a character in a show, and then also just as a human being, he's really unique. Mm-hmm. Which is, how can someone be that relentlessly optimistic? Number one, in the face of all the things you face, how can he be that optimistic and that we believe it? And then number two, how can he be that optimistic and not be annoying? Because the thing about Luffy, and when we were casting a lot of the tapes that we got from people, Luffy was either annoying or people were playing him, trying to convince someone to come with him on this journey. And he came off like he was trying to like con you. A lot of people, there was a cynicism that it wasn't overt, but it was really subtle. And it just felt like, oh, that guy's trying to sell me something, as opposed to, no, I genuinely believe this. And, the fact that Zoro, that a character as kind of stoic as Zoro can say about Luffy, he believes in himself, and that's enough. That's enough for me. You better believe that the Luffy character is sincere. And that's the thing that Iñaki, I think, really brought to the role, is that sincerity. He's a very sincere young man, and it translates. And if he did not get that role, I don't know who we would have had in reserve, because he was really unique.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, honestly, kudos to him too. Like, I guess, how was the casting process? Like, that must have been.
It was long.
Hard. Especially hearing this. But
thank God we had Oda's SBS notes, the ones where people had asked him many years ago, if the characters were from our world, what countries would they be from? And so it was like Zoro would be Japanese, Luffy would be Brazilian, and there was this whole list, and we couldn't follow it directly. Although, boy, did we scour Brazil looking for Luffy's, but we found a Mexican actor for Luffy. We found our Zoro in Makenyu, who, as luck would have it, loved the manga and loved the Zoro character. That being said, the casting is really tough. Iñaki has a very thick accent, and we want to make sure that people can understand, the dialogue in the show. And so we had to re-record some stuff to make sure that it came through. Not the same with Makenyu, but Makenyu, thank God, has a beautiful, accent that makes him really easy to understand. A lot of the other folks that we got tape on were physically great, were really good actors, and we couldn't understand them. And that was very tough. And we were, really torn about, can we find a Japanese actor to play Zoro who can do the English dialogue and be understandable? So that was
His
tough.
with Zoro, I don't want to interrupt, but I was like with Zoro, I noticed this specifically. Like Zoro seemed like he actually knew how to use a sword. Like it
Oh,
didn't
he
seem like
does.
he was an actor
Yeah, yeah,
doing some stuff. He seemed like he was legit. Like, oh, this is martial arts.
yeah.
Is that true, or am I just like
No,
making things
you're
up?
absolutely right. And McKenna was in more of his. Everyone did a lot of their own stunts. McKenna was in more of his fights, I think, than anybody. The actor, as opposed to having a stunt guy in there. We rarely use stuntmen for McKenna because he is so good with a sword. And I don't know if you've seen him in Rurouni Kenshin or
Yes, there we
any
go.
other stuff he's done live action, but he is. I mean, McKenna's thing was always, let's go faster. And we're like, McKenna, man, we're gonna end up stabbing a stuntman because they're not as fast as you, and they weren't. He is so good with katana, and everything about the way that he learned, movie fighting is faster, faster, faster. And you memorize the moves, and then you try to execute them as quickly as possible. And really, we had a conversation with me in shooting, and it's like the amount of time it takes me to do one strike on the show, I could do three. So, can we speed up? And we tried as much as we could, but at the end of the day, no one was fast enough to keep up with him. And we were in South Africa, so we did bring in a Japanese sword choreographer, but we didn't have access to the stunt people that he was used to working with. So our stunt guys did the very best they could. I think they did a good job.
They did the best they could.
They did.
That's crazy.
I mean, honestly, I heard that like a lot of the cast actually like did their own thing. Like I heard that Jacob was running through the woods, and and
Oh, for sure.
and I mean that's amazing. Like so, like they all did their thing. Like they all like really learned their part for this.
Emily was really good with the bow staff as well. And Taz, God bless him, was from the beginning, because Taz came in into the season, into the shooting schedule pretty late, because he's the last one who joins up. And so we actually ended up shooting out of sequence because of the weather. And so we shot episodes 1 and 2 first. Then we went to 5 and 6 at Baratier. Then we went to 7 and 8 at Arlong Park. And then we went as winter hit for us. We did 3 and 4 at Syrup Village, because a lot of that show was those episodes were at night. And so Taz had a little bit of a wait through the first block and was waiting to the second. And man, he was learning how to cook and handle knives. He was stretching and kicking and just doing feet choreography for months before he actually got on there. And so they were very dedicated to their craft and to making the characters, seem as real as possible.
That's good to know, because I know with as much as mixed martial arts has blown up in the last like decade or two,
Mhm.
enough people have taken classes to know that if the kick looks bad, people are gonna start saying things on Reddit.
Yeah.
People are gonna start complaining. So like to have all your stuff queued out like that is perfect. That's crazy.
For real. I want to get back more to you, actually. Like, what got you into producing and like making stuff? And also, I do also want to ask, like, how come One Piece? Like, what made you choose One
Yeah,
Piece?
sure. So I started out working at a studio, TriStar Pictures, when I was out of college, and I thought I wanted to be an executive or a producer, kind of a non-writing producer. And I didn't really start writing for a couple of years, but I ended up working as a script reader for a while. And so my job was to read scripts and write coverage on them, which is for executives to read if they don't have time to read the entire script or book themselves. And so I must have read 2,000 scripts over a couple of years, and really got to a point where my career wasn't going anywhere. And I was like, I got to do something if I want to stay in this business. Maybe I can write. And I don't know why I had never considered it. I love writing, but I just was late to that game. And so I started writing and fell in love with it, and then got very lucky. And I sold a feature script that never got made. I worked in features for a couple of years, but then television was again something I sort of stumbled into and loved so much, because in movie making and feature making, it really is a director's medium. And so the director is with the project doing all the kind of finalizing of things, and he's the person on set. We still have directors for TV as well, but the writer producers are the ones who generally have those responsibilities, which I really loved. And so I started writing a show. Once I started writing for television, I got hired by the guys, Chris Carter and the team that did the X-Files. And I worked on another show of theirs called Harsh Realm that didn't last very long, but they hired me out. They brought me into X-Files. And so that was incredibly lucky. And I worked on the last 3 seasons of X-Files, and then sort of just kind of leapfrog from there onto various shows, kind of working my way up the chain. And as you work your way up, you also get more responsibility for not just the writing, but actually producing episodes. And you learn, you go to post and you go to set. And it's part of the reason that we were on strike. So until very recently, thank God that's over. But one of the big problems with the relatively new way of shooting, it's much more like features, where your scripts are all done by the time you get to shoot the show. So it's not like the broadcast model of television where you were, 4 scripts in and production starts, and now you've got to be writing and shooting the show at the same time. With this kind of streaming model, your scripts are done, then you go and shoot it. And unfortunately, what that means is that the younger writers were not on staff any longer and couldn't come to set or sit in post because they were already off to other jobs, or couldn't be paid to do that anyway. And
I
so
see.
I was very fortunate to kind of come up in a time where I could learn all that stuff, and where my bosses were kind enough to say, hey, go to set, go sit in post. If you see a problem, call us, and that's how you're going to learn to do it, is when the actor comes to you and says, I don't like this line. What are you going to do? Are you going to try to talk them into it? Or are you going to try to make a change for them? And it depends. It depends on the actor. It depends on the show. So that kind of was my intro, and kind of worked my way up the chain. And then I finally got to the point where I was allowed to show run a show, which is really, you're like the coach of a team at that point. So you're still writing, but you're supervising everyone else's writing as well. And then you're responsible for not just the creative stuff that goes on, but also financially to make sure, not by yourself, but financially to make sure that the show doesn't go over budget, that it sticks to the schedule, that when you say you're going to deliver something by a certain date, you get it done no matter what. So that it doesn't end up costing a studio or network more money. And if it does, you better, get in touch with them quickly and say, hey, we got a problem. So it's kind of being being given the keys to dad's car, and saying, don't mess this up. And so that's that's how you get into the show running world primarily, is doing that. And I just love it. It's an opportunity to, spend 4 years with a show, and, occasionally with One Piece, you get something that's really great at the end of it.
That's amazing. Like you said, you wrote like the pilots for One Piece. Like, did you always have One Piece in mind as like the show you want to do?
No, not at all. I had heard of One Piece, but I did not know it very well at all until I heard about the job, and I very quickly read the first 100 chapters, and I read them again to really get them in, and just fell in love with it. And so at the time, the studio, Tomorrow Studios, had made a deal with Shueisha and Odasan to try to do a live action version of the show. And so I came on right around then. And then, so I was with it not from the very, very beginning of the deal making. They were on for like another year plus, doing all of that, making sure that they could get that deal to go through. It was a long, long birthing process, from inception to getting it on the air, for sure.
I'm shocked it happened, honestly, but like I'm glad it did.
Me too. And I think finally it got to the place where Oda was ready to let it happen. In addition to the visual effects were still expensive, but cost effective enough to be able to do that show justice in television. Because the thing about TV versus a movie is you can shoot for months and months and months on a movie, but you're making 2 hours, pretty much, an hour and a half to 2.5 hours of screen time that you have to have film for. On an 8-episode show, there's 8 hours. And it's a lot more work to polish those 8 hours than it is to, I think anyway, than to polish the 2 hours. It's just you have to come up with a lot more material.
I see. And everything has to be, I guess, tight, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have thought it'd be the other way. Like with 2-hour movie, maybe that's harder.
I'm sure it's incredibly difficult because you're spending so much time on every little nuance of a 2-hour movie. But the thing about the 8 hours is people don't care that you have 4 times as much space to fill as the 2-hour movie. They want it to be just as good, and rightfully so. They want the effects to be good. They want the acting to be good. It's like people are not saying, "Oh, that was a movie, so of course it's better," or they've had more time to put into the 2-hour frame. They want to look at your 8 hours or 10 hours and go, that wasn't as good as the last Marvel movie or Star Wars movie I saw. They're going to rip you up, so it better be good.
Yeah. Dang.
You were talking earlier. You were talking about giving direction to like when you were writing and things like that. You're kind of giving direction to the actors and things like that. Sometimes you're having to they have ideas of how they want to say the lines, things like that. In your experience, no names needed. Can you give us do you have any situations in mind that were just real difficult situations to work with? You're like, hey, we need it done like this, and the person was just like, I think it's better this way or something. Is that something that happens often, or is it usually
it happens way too often? Way too often. And some actors are very respectful of the process. Everyone on One Piece was. They were fantastic. But I've worked on shows before where actors are either nervous or afraid or just truly creatively disagree with the direction that a show is going in. And it's hairy because you get in there and an actor says, I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to do this scene. And you're like, you have to do the scene. The scene is approved and it's been through the process. All the studio, the network has checked off on it. We're doing the scene. And the actor's like, no, I'm not. And you have to figure out ways to resolve those. Usually what I've learned is that actors want to be listened to. Whether or not you make a change is another story entirely, but they want to be heard and they want to know. They want you to know that they have a concern about a certain area or a line or something that their character has to do. And it's about trying to find some kind of compromise where you can get across the spirit of what you were trying to do without upsetting something that's going to happen later in the show or contradicting something that happened earlier in the show. And so, yeah, it happens all the time, more often than I'd like. But it's ultimately, it's very collaborative. It's not like writing a book where, you put the words on the page and aside from your editor, no one's changing anything. Those are your words on the page. The scripted entertainment process, movies and TV are collaborative. They just are. And so you better be able to know how to work with people in order to tell the best story you can.
It's a lot more interpersonal than I expected.
Oh, yeah, very much.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, I was going to say, would you say when it comes to these, when they're just like, no, I'm not going to say that, is that a lot of times more maybe they're trying to be true to their character and they've been in this character for 3 seasons or something and that would match?
Yeah. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's, a lot of times, look, they know the character a lot of times better than you do because you're writing for all the characters on the show and they're just saying their lines and being that character as best they can. So sometimes it's about, would my character actually say that? Or my character wouldn't say that. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's character protection, which you don't run into so much in the cable and streaming world because characters can be very unlikable. As long as they're interesting, it's okay for them to be unlikable. I think with broadcast television, you'd run into situations where you were going to make a character do something unlikable, and the networks or actors are sometimes very afraid to let that thing happen because someone wasn't going to like them. And that kind of character protection is something that you always have to fight against, both with studios and networks and with actors, to say, hey, let your character have a flaw. Let your character be weak. Let them do a thing that makes them look bad. It's okay because it's going to keep them interesting, and it's also going to give you an opportunity to have some character arc and actually travel and learn something.
Yeah,
let that character
range,
be
right.
Yeah, let them make the mistake early on. Let them be vulnerable and let them have moments where they don't perform as well as they might. They make mistakes and they fuck up. And if you do that, then you will have a really rich character who gets to then try to overcome that or try to deal with past mistakes, as opposed to protecting your character always. And then you don't have any place to go because they're always perfect and they do the right thing.
Yeah. That's cool. I never thought about that as an actual issue.
Yeah.
I remember the first time hearing about the whole actors saying they're really giving their input, because you always know they do that. Of course, they're like, hey, it's like a trope almost. But I remember just off the top of my head, I remember the Fast and Furious thing with it was like Dwayne Johnson and Vin Diesel were just beefing because they were both trying to write the script essentially or something like that.
It's you have to. There has to be some level of trust somewhere. And sometimes that works out with, an actor knows the character so well, and other times it doesn't. And it's just, you're going to have to deal with it in some fashion. Um, but it's very hard because once an actor signs onto a project, they become more important to the project than you are as the writer or as the director sometimes. And as a result, um, you have to take what they're saying into account. You can't just say, nope, not going to say that, or I'm not going to make that change for you, or I'll fire you. You just can't. You don't have that latitude. Um, and because the actor's there and they're the face of the franchise. And, I've had actors say to me before, point to the poster at the studio and say, you see that up there? That's me. And I'm like, I get that. So it's like, and if the show succeeds, it's going to be because of me, and if the show fails, it's going to be blamed on me, you know. And they're right. No one's going to say, Steve did a crappy show. They're going to say, oh, so and so big actor made a crappy show, and they're the face of the show, and they're going to get blamed for it, and they're right.
That's a fair
Yeah,
point.
that's
Honestly,
valid.
that is a
That's
fair
really
point.
valid.
It does
Yeah.
sound. It sounds a way that's like, ugh, but I guess that is very fair. I
Yeah,
did
it's
want to
tough.
ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is tough. Like I there's so many more pressures than I guess we were aware of. Like especially as the consumer, right? Just like, oh, that movie sucked, but that could be like a long term thing for many
It's actually
people, right?
amazing how dysfunctional really good shows can be. You're watching a show about, patience and love and understanding, and behind the scenes, people could be yelling and screaming and hating each other's guts and shooting heroin. So um, you just don't know what went into it. If there's chemistry there and it's all there up front, um, sometimes that is not reflective of what's going on behind the scenes. And it's always shocking to me when I really enjoy a movie or a TV show, and then I hear about the beef that is going on behind the scene, or that these two characters or two actors hated each other, or the director and the showrunner couldn't stand each other, or stuff like that. You're like, wow, really? That's too
Wow.
bad, because it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be that way. It
Yeah.
really doesn't.
And it wasn't like, oh, how, I mean, it sounded like it was a good time for y'all, right?
It was great. We had a great time. Yeah, it was a lot
Good.
of fun. Boy, it was long, but a lot of fun.
Good. Let me just also keep that magic just in case it was there was some trauma. It's like, no, everyone loved
Got
each
that out
other.
if you
They're
said anything
family.
other. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, like, how did you guys feel in those 4 years before it came out? Like, what was the feeling of making this? Like, did you feel like an underdog? And like, I guess, like, was there like stress and worry that this was going to be good, or did you guys like believe in yourselves the whole time? Like that was like, no, this is
No,
gonna,
certainly you can't go into this unless you believe in yourself and
yeah,
say, you know what, I think we're doing the right thing, but at the same time, you don't know. And, there's a very famous kind of show business aphorism, which is William Goldman, who wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, very famously said, nobody knows anything. And what he meant by that, what I take it to mean, is that you can have worked in this business for decades. You can be the most talented person, writer, director, executive, actor. And at the end of the day, nobody knows if a show is going to be good or if a movie is going to be good. It can come out and bomb spectacularly, even though the incredibly talented people were working on it. Or sometimes the chemistry is there and the magic is there, and the show will fly out of the room. It'll have this magic fairy dust on it that is just the chemistry, the story, everything is working. And when that happens, it's a lot of hard work and a lot of talent, but it's also a lot of luck. And so we knew that we were going to be heavily scrutinized. We knew that it wasn't going to be an easy journey, especially if we got to fight for the budget that we wanted on it. But it was, yeah, there was belief in ourselves and in myself that, yeah, you know what, I think we can do this. And we all saw Bebop. We all were familiar with the expectations, and we were also reading, watching podcasts and reading, social media, and seeing that people were really nervous about the show. And it wasn't so much hate for the sake of hate; it was nerves. It was, boy, they don't have a good track record
yeah,
making
Netflix,
manga
yeah,
and anime adaptations. This is going to suck like that again. I don't want to be disappointed again. And One Piece, oh, that's one of my favorites. I don't want it to suck. And I totally get that. It's like, if I made One Piece suck, then I deserve all the scorn heaped on me. But it was like, okay, if the show is so special, the underlying material is so special. If we do it right, it feels like there's a show here. It feels like there's something that people can grab onto, and that we can please both the diehard fans and have the show, understandable enough to appeal to new fans as well. And if we succeed in that show and really make the 4 quad show, which is you want to appeal to all ages and demographics across the board, when you succeed in that, you can be incredibly successful. And when you fail spectacularly, and no one watches because you're pleasing nobody in that case. And it's very easy to trip into that.
Man, I'm glad you guys made this work and you guys found that
Yeah, me
balance.
too.
And I'm glad you guys were also aware. It felt like you guys were aware the whole time of like how people felt about it. Like I really enjoyed seeing all the behind the scenes and the casting decisions and hearing the cast like talk about like their love of the franchise. And it all felt very genuine and real. And
It
it
was.
was
It
breath
means
of
something.
fresh air. Yeah.
It means something too to have people really fall in love with the material. It's not always the case. A show can still be really good if people don't fall in love with the material, but it helps
Yeah.
for sure. And especially with a story like this,
It's
where
like
it
this
was
for
such a
sure.
long process. It's like you needed to have something to hang on to. And the fact that the underlying material was so good and so rich, and we all wanted to do the best version of the story helped a lot. And I will say that every department across the board they outperformed. It's like once they got the tone, and a lot of it was kind of introducing people to the tone who hadn't been on the show for the last 2.5 years. And they would come up with wonderful magical things that were not One Piece, and we had to be a very kind of instructive hand in saying this is okay. This feels like One Piece. This is great, inventive stuff, very unique. This is really cool, but it's not One Piece. Let's not do that. Let's not go too far away from the source material, because if we do, the fan base has the potential to kind of recoil from it. So keep it all One Piece. And then once they realize that, and that they could dive into anywhere in One Piece and pull ideas from, then it was really special. And you got stuff um, like the snail megaphone that was or the little tiny Bluetooth snail,
Yeah.
which was nothing that anybody I think ever saw in the manga other than something in someone's ear, and became like a really cool part of the show because folks in those departments said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we took it a step further and did this?
Yeah, you guys have now added on to the franchise like really well. Like I like this is dope. Like it sort of made like the house of the franchise of One Piece like a bigger, like here's this new room that
Mm-hmm.
like we all get to enjoy versus like something that like we were afraid we have to just be like whatever, it's there, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, that was the
Um,
goal. And so I'm very happy. Look, I've worked on enough shows before that I've either gone a season and out, or, you come onto a show that's having a problem trying to save it and get it back up on its feet. And sometimes those don't work either. And so it's really, really rewarding to have your expectations met, and people for the most part, to really enjoy it and be, you know, super invested in what we did.
that's thank you guys. I'm really glad you guys knocked it out.
Yeah.
I do want to ask, how was it? Did you actually get to like meet Oda also, by the way?
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
Definitely went on a trip to Tokyo to meet Oda the very early going. He is a tough customer, but loves this material so much. It's his baby, and I've always said this is his world, and we get to his sandbox. We get to play in it, which is really cool to be a part of that. But he met him and had numerous Zoom calls and things with him, and he's tough. He knows One Piece better than anybody. Doesn't know a lot about television. He knows a lot more now, but he's very, very protective, but also was collaborative enough to allow us to take those liberties that were different from the manga in order for the show to be received better. And I think they were. I think he was rewarded in trusting us to do that stuff.
I'm also
I
happy
think
that it worked out. Go, sorry.
no, I was just gonna say I think you guys knocked it out of the park, and I'm not saying that I'm just as far as when I remember when I initially watched One Piece. I watched the anime. I didn't get to read the manga much. I wasn't a manga reader initially. Now I'm a full manga enthusiast, but
Yep.
I started on the anime and I saw the live action, and I think no one kill me. I think I liked the live action more. Initially, just initially. I don't know where it's gonna go.
Blasphemy.
Hopefully
No,
it
I'm
gets
kidding.
even better. But
No, I think that's fair.
yeah, I thought it was really like I was just chilling. I was eating my food and I was like, this is cool. This is nice. Like, you know what I
That's
mean?
exactly what
Fight
we
scenes,
wanted.
Yeah, it was enjoyable. It was an enjoyable thing just to watch on the weekends and stuff like that. I liked it.
That's great.
So I think hopefully you end up becoming like, hopefully you end up becoming the guy when it comes to like these anime adaptations. If you have any other like love or passions that you want to end up doing, because no disrespect to the Cowboy Bebop live action, I didn't find it appalling like most of the internet did, or a lot of people were saying. I didn't think it was a train wreck. It was just, I feel like it was very difficult to take those characters, like we talked about earlier, and I think you mentioned earlier, like getting this massive amount of content out of something sometimes small. For instance, Spike or Vicious. I'm sure you're familiar with the characters.
Yeah.
Both those characters might have a total of 100 lines in the whole show, because neither of them talks very much.
Yeah.
And they're both more about being cool and being anime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Vicious is he's very what's the word, Godswell? He's very
Stoic,
imposing.
yeah, in a way, right?
Yeah, stoic is perfect for both of them. Vic, one's more imposing stoic, and the other one's a little bit more cool guy. Like, hey, I'm gonna say something real cool, and I'm gonna dance and kick people in the face.
Yeah.
So to make it to where you give those characters full on lines, because we have to make a show about you.
Yeah.
Like, for people to come out and then be like, "This isn't Spike," I'm like, "What do you want him to do? Nothing? Like, you don't just not talk?" Like, I feel like you kind of found a line somehow. You took these characters who are very animated and you toned them down just enough to where, I mean, you got Oda's blessing on this to sound like, but it also made it to where the newer people who just watch Grey's Anatomy all day can watch this and be like, "Oh, this is pretty interesting."
Yeah, thank you. That was the goal, to try and definitely have there be enough story, and that was part of the reason for bringing Garp and Kobe and Helmeppo in, for example, which it just gave you, not only was it, I think, interesting and made it more dangerous for the Straw Hats to have Marines pursuing them, gave you a sense of the world a little bit more, because we didn't want to get into world government or any of the stuff going on with that in season 1. And just bringing those characters along gave you opportunities to have that pursuit, right, breathing, down their necks. But at the same time, it gave you time to get away from the Straw Hat story and get into this new Marine story. And the idea was, one of the things I loved about doing that was that when Kobe meets Luffy in the manga, after Kobe's done, after they separate, Kobe kind of falls out of the story, except for those little cover pages that Oda-san drew. And it was an opportunity to tell the story, a version of the Kobe Helmeppo story, and also have them both taken under Garp's wing. And to see these two guys who are enemies become friends, but then also Kobe, for me, is the perfect kind of companion to Luffy on the journey, because Luffy wants to be the king of the pirates. He wants to be the greatest pirate in the world. Kobe wants to be the greatest Marine. He really wants to. He believes in that the same way that Luffy believes in being a pirate. And so to see these two guys both striving for a goal, but a goal that's going to make them enemies at the end, that the scene where Kobe comes and delivers, I really wanted Kobe to be the one to deliver that wanted poster to Luffy and say, "Hey, you got your wish." And it was I was there on set when they shot that scene, and it was so moving to watch them and to watch Inyaki's reaction, and these two friends kind of come together and complete their journey. At least the first step of their journey was incredibly rewarding, not in the manga, but felt very much in keeping with the a first season of the show.
I loved it. I love seeing Kobe and actually making Helmeppo like likable.
Yeah.
Like I really liked this arc of the Marines and the pirates. And it felt like a very fast moving snowball, chasing after Luffy with like, oh, so many more people are paying attention to you and are actually coming after you.
And the thing that I loved so much was the ability to then take something that Oda-san wrote 300 chapters down the road, which is the grandfather angle between and Garp.
People were shocked hearing that.
Play it at the exact halfway point of the season, which is so great, because in any season of television, you want something at that halfway point that ups the stakes, twists on its head, so that you're like, huh? What? Say what? And on the same time, escalates things. So you're like, oh shit, Garp's not just after him because he's a hard-ass Marine and these young pirates are, need to be stopped. It's his grandson and someone that he loves and doesn't want to see die, and so it's personal to him now. And it just took both of those characters and escalated them and raised the stakes of the show, so that now you're leaning in to the last 4 episodes going, oh man, I got to see what happens. How is this going to be resolved?
I thought it was so good. So good. I'm really happy like that. Like the choices that you guys have made hit really well. Like
Yeah, thank you.
I was really worried when I saw, like, especially like, like in the beginning, like, oh man, this Zora scene, being a hard, well, this is different, but
Yeah,
everything worked out really well. And I think it was actually even better pacing. I mean, I can agree with Josh, like, where it's like, low key, I wish like One Piece sort of starts like this. So that way it can get people like easier into the franchise. But at the same time, uh, this was a fantastic addition, and like I'm really glad that like it's like another way of enjoying this franchise too.
yeah, thank you. That makes me incredibly happy because that was the whole goal is to create something that wasn't brand spanking new, but was enough to introduce new people to it, so that people would then be able to watch as many different versions of the show and experience it as many different ways as they could. But also, we really, really cared about the hardcore fans, and the people who fell in love with it. And understandable. It's like when I read the first 100, I fell in love with it. And I'm like, oh man, I want to see that scene between Shanks and Luffy where he gives him the straw hat. That if we get that right, there shouldn't be a dry eye in the house. Because it's such a wonderful moment. How do we do that? How do we shoot that? And we ended up shooting it. That was one where we took the frame of the manga panel and said to the director, "Can we please shoot this in profile and do this exactly, in a not identical way, but a very similar way to how it is in the manga?" And he did, and it turned out great. And the performances, they killed me.
They killed it. Yeah, honestly, they killed it. Yeah, you're right. Like as you said earlier, like I think every different department like really hit it out of the park.
Yeah,
The music was dope. The costumes were amazing. The acting, every little bit. The sets, bravo to you
yeah,
guys. And
you killed it.
I'm
Thank
happy
you.
I could just tell you that myself.
Yeah, thank you. And that's the goal. You always want to have departments who bring their own creativity and inventiveness to the show and really care about it. And it's a lot of work. For each episode, we would have to meet with each department and talk about wardrobe for the show, talk about props for the show, talk about sets and what we're going to build and what we were going to have to extend. The one thing that I loved was. Or one of the things I really loved was talking with costume about not having them wear the same thing for every episode. And that was another one I was really big on because I was like, it feels too cosplay. If they're going to wear the same
Yes.
thing like they wear in the manga for great portions of it, it's going to feel like cosplay. And Oda, God bless him, had written those color walk books where he had all of those, great looks and really cool kind of fashion choices for them. And we went to Diana Cilliers, our costume designer, and said, "Give us some of these, please, because they're here and they're Odas and they're beautiful. So let's do some of those." And then it was kind of mixing and matching and picking what wardrobe was going to be worn by which character in which episode, which was really fun as well.
Oh man, I gotta bring up the Adidas. Yeah, the fact that like I remember like feeling like a sort of a fear, like not seeing Luffy in sandals, but it's sort of cool to see them all like in honestly some pretty cool shoes. That
Yeah,
was
and
an
the
interesting
Luffy
choice, but
thing
it makes
was
sense.
that was the Luffy thing was a safety choice because we couldn't have him in sandals and have him do all the stunts. It was too dangerous, and so we're like, "What are we going to do?" Or it's way too expensive to remove the shoes digitally, um, and so rather than that, we designed shoes that look like sandals, and it was the best we could do. I know people when they saw the photo of that were kind of up in arms, and it was like, "Oh man, they're going to hang up on the shoes." But they did, and I understand it. But it really was a safety issue more than anything else because we just couldn't have him do all those stunts barefoot or in
That
sandals.
makes
It,
a
it
lot of
would have
sense.
been way too
Flip flops kill
dangerous.
people in real life, right? Yeah, flip flops
I'm
are
looking it up right
especially like on
now.
a boat, I imagine, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
let me. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just looking it up right now. I'm just curious
Oh
to
yeah,
see
yeah,
what
yeah,
this
yeah,
is. Like,
right. Yeah, I had quite a few people be like, "Yo, peep the shoes," and I'm like, "Oh yes," cracked me up. But
that
I
was
thought
it.
it
It
was a
was
good
really a
touch.
safety angle more than anything else. Yeah,
I liked it. I mean, they look fresh, honestly. I did want to ask, um, I think one last question, maybe, unless
yeah,
Josh
sure.
has something. But do you have a favorite straw hat and a non-straw hat? You
Yeah,
personally?
sure. Look, I love Luffy. I love Inyaki, and so I love Luffy. But I really love Zoro. He's such
Hey,
a cool character, and McKenya, the way he played him, I think was so. it was stoic, but at the same time, a little bit vulnerable. And I'll tell you, when I watched McKenyu's performance, when I was on set, I was like, man, he doesn't look like he's really getting into it that much. It looks like he's being so reserved. I wonder if that's going to translate on screen. And when I saw the first cut of him cut into the show, I was like, oh my God, he absolutely nailed it. And I had nothing to worry about because he plays it kind of reserved. When he does emote or crack or give a little bit of a smile, you just enjoy it so much. And he's amazing. So yes, they were all the Straw Hats were great, but I really do love Zorro. And then you know who was really a huge favorite of mine was Jeff Ward's Buggy. Um,
Yes,
he
yes.
just killed it to the point where, I mean, we love the character so much that we added that whole bit of carrying his head around, because it felt like that's a really fun way to keep Buggy alive in the show, and he's such a great character. Let's really have some fun with him.
I'm
Um,
glad you got to stick around for
it
sure.
was a huge debate with Oda and with because of the rules of Buggy's head, and can he be that far away from his body and still feel things in his body? Does he, or is he completely? How does that work? And so we had to come to a compromise, but I think it worked great.
Love it, love it. You have anything you want to ask Josh too?
I think there was two. One was about Zorro, but I don't remember it anymore, so I'm gonna go on.
Okay.
The other one was the kid actors, man.
Oh yeah.
That was phenomenal. I was confused. I was like, "Yo, the kid Luffy." Well, two points to kid Luffy. One, he did a great job the whole time. I'd buy him some Chick-fil-A or something. I don't know. And I don't know what kids can what they can eat, so no drinks. But yeah, two. Whose decision? I want you to be honest with me. Whose
Yeah.
decision was it to have a Mexican Luffy and then have the kid form be a black kid? That was immediate. I was like, that's a black person.
Yeah, it was hard. That was tough because Colton is who played young Luffy is such a good little actor. He really is phenomenal, and we're like, man, he looks enough like Luffy to pull it off. But the killer there was Inyaki's accent, and we're like, are people going to buy this? Are they going to hear Colton speaking? First off, they don't look exactly alike, but Colton is more mixed race, and so we're like, you know what? He's got the curly hair, like Inyaki's. There's enough of a similarity. Let's just go for it and see what happens, because we want the best actors in the role. So
Yes.
it was not a perfect match, but at the same time, I feel like we got the right actors for it, and they're in the right spirit. But we were really worried about the accents, and then for other folks, we flew in, I think, young Sanji from England, young Nami from the States, and Colton, young Luffy, also from the United States. And then young Usopp was a South African actor, and I think that was, and young Zorro was an American as well. So we flew in four of them, and they were great. They were really wonderful. Kids are tough because a lot of times they just don't have the same acting chops. They haven't had the life experience, and they're kids. Um, so it can be really hard on them. And then on top of that, it's hard on the production because kids can only shoot 4 hours a day. And so you have one of the assistant directors timing when the kid comes on set and when they go off, so that you don't you don't go over those 4 hours. You get in a lot of trouble. And they have to go to school. They have school hours. They have, there's a lot of great rules in place for child actors so that they're not taken advantage of. And they're kids, they're kids in a workplace, and it's dangerous.
Right.
So it's hard because you have to plan around their schedules because they can't work full days. That said, it was so important to the show, and I really felt like we've got to see those flashbacks in order to understand who these characters are. If we don't,
Yes,
we're doing ourselves a huge disservice, and the audience will not be as invested in the show.
absolutely.
Right.
Like I'm
They
really
killed it.
happy. Also, my favorite personally was Sanji's. Like I thought, like kid actor killed it, and I was like, yes, no dry eyes with with Sanji's story.
Yeah, he was good. He was really good. And the kids were great. They were wonderful, and they, I think added just a huge component of the show, in the ability to do those flashbacks and have you believe that and I'll tell you a final story, which is the Netflix wanted to cut a sizzle reel together to show like internally at the network. And so we hired an editor who was in addition to our other editors to just cut that sizzle reel together. I can't remember his name, unfortunately. And he cut together like a bunch of cool stuff. We ended up not using the sizzle reel because we were afraid it was going to leak. But he put together that barrel pledge scene at the end, cutting into the young actors saying, mouthing the lines as the adult actor was saying the line. And I saw that. I watched the sizzle reel, and it got to the barrel pledge, and I almost fell out of my fucking chair. I was just like, oh my God, that is so, I was so moved by that. And it wasn't scripted. It wasn't our idea. It was this editor who came in to do this sizzle reel and came up and found that and cut it together. And I was like, we've got to do that. We've got to put that in the show because it is so wonderful. And at the first time we showed that episode to the studio executives, the network executives, they cried. And it was because he found that particular moment cutting from the adult characters to the kid characters and having the words come out of the kid characters' mouths. And it was just wonderful. It was perfect.
That's so beautiful.
Good shit.
I'm so happy for y'all, and congratulations. This was a standout project that I think really gave hope to possibility of adaptations again.
I certainly hope. I want to see more. I want to do more.
Yeah, exactly. And we're hyped for you to do more, honestly. So, hey, more seasons to come, right?
Yep.
Excited.
I'm putting my I'm vouching for this one. I know no one cares what my vouch goes for. I'm vouching for you to take all the anime adaptations after this. I don't want to hear nobody. I don't want to see no one else's name listed after anything.
I love it. From your mouth to God's ear.
Love it. Yo, thank you so much for joining us. This was a fantastic interview, and thank you for honestly showing us the process. It was wonderful to hear about your life.
Yeah, sure.
And once again, thank you for doing justice for this live action. Where can people find you if you want people to find you?
Sure. I'm on Instagram at Steve Maeda, and I'm on Twitter/X as well. But I post a lot of behind the scenes stuff and that sort of thing, and that's where I am.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This was a dope interview, and would love to have you back on again. And of course, more events and things to come through. You guys got to come for more.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Dope. And everyone that listened, appreciate y'all. You guys are dope. As always, stay dope, y'all. Peace.